Hey cat. Hey everyone and welcome back to my kitchen. I hope everyone had a great new year. I'm glad we're finally out of 2020 and moving on. And to start the year off, we're going to be cooking recipes from this Dungeons & Dragons Heroes Feast cookbook. Since we had some heavier foods last week for the holidays, I thought we'd slow down and make something relatively healthy from the Elven side of Dungeons & Dragons. Honestly, the recipes were pretty clear and concise on the steps and ingredients that it felt really easy to follow. The steps might seem a little complicated if you weren't very comfortable in the kitchen, but maybe after watching me do the recipes, it'll inspire you to make them. The first thing we'll start making is Elven Bread, since it'll take me the longest to make with the proof time. Our ingredients are whole milk, whole wheat flour, all-purpose flour, unsalted butter, eggs, honey, and instant yeast. Then for our filling, we have cinnamon, granulated sugar, and another egg. First, we're going to heat up the milk until it reaches about 110 degrees, give or take, then measure out the yeast. Then I'll take a quarter cup of that warm milk and combine it with the yeast in the mixing bowl until it dissolves. Something to consider is how cold your mixing bowl is going to be. I poured my warm milk into a cold mixing bowl and the temperature of the milk immediately dropped, making it really hard for my yeast to dissolve. I suggest mixing it elsewhere first until it dissolves and then adding it into the mixing bowl. What I ended up doing, since I already poured the milk in the bowl and let it cool down, is add more warm milk into the bowl and then stir it up. We're going to crack 2 eggs in a bowl and mix it up a bit for our dough. Then I'll start melting my butter, and while it's melting, I'll measure out both of my flours. After that, we're going to measure out our honey, and when I measure out honey, I typically spray whatever container it is that I'm going to measure it with so that it'll slide out easier. And then finally, a little bit of salt. With everything finally measured out, we're going to start making the dough in a stand mixer. If you don't have a stand mixer, you can always do it by hand, but since I have one, I'm going to use it. So in this bowl right now, we have that yeast that we dissolved in that warm milk. With the pedal attachment going on a low speed, we're just going to add the rest of our milk, the honey, the eggs, the melted butter, and the salt. I waited until the first ingredient was mixed in before adding the next one, so don't just dump it all in there. Then we're just going to add the whole wheat flour and then the all-purpose flour in the same fashion. Just slowly add it so you don't have a blowout. When the dough looks like it's been mixed well, we're just going to switch it to the dough hook, or if you want, you can knead it by hand. After you've been mixing for about 8 minutes, or kneading by hand for about 15 minutes, the dough should be a little tacky but not sticky. Then we're just going to remove it and put it into a grease bowl. I sprayed mine with non-stick spray, but you can use whatever you want. Then we'll cover it with some plastic wrap and let it sit somewhere warmish for about an hour. While it's sitting somewhere warm and proofing, we're just going to prepare the filling. To make it, we just need to combine the sugar, flour, and cinnamon in a bowl and set it aside. We'll also take the one remaining egg left and mix it with a tablespoon of water and set it aside with the filling. It's been about an hour and our dough has risen. I'm just going to take this butter and rub it all over my loaf pan, making sure to get all the corners. Then we'll flour our bench and remove the dough from the bowl, and then we'll cut it in half. I'm going to weigh them so that they weigh exactly the same, but you can just eyeball it if you'd like. I'm going to cover the piece of dough that I'm not working on to prevent it from drying out, and then we'll just roll our dough, making sure to flour as needed. The dough should be 8 by 20, but there's no need to be completely picky about it. After it's been rolled to said dimensions, we're going to brush it with the egg wash, and then we'll liberally sprinkle on the filling. Now we're just going to take the bottom end and roll it up tightly. If it's a little bit too big like mine, you can just scrunch up the sides a little bit. Then we're just going to put it in the loaf pan with the seam side down and cover it in plastic wrap and let it proof for about an hour or two. This process is repeated with the second loaf. When it's finished proofing, you'll put it into a 400 degree oven for about 10 minutes, then you're going to lower it to 350 degrees for about 30 to 40 minutes or until it's done. It should be a nice golden brown color on top and sound hollow when you tap on it. When it's done baking, make sure you immediately remove it from the loaf pans, otherwise the bottoms will steam a little bit and get soggy, and nobody likes a soggy bottom. After you remove them from the pan and let it completely cool, we'll slice into it with a serrated knife. In the end, it should look something like this. With our bread finished, we're going to start on our wood L4 salad. What we have here is olive oil, chives, honey, Brussel sprouts, and back here is a shallot, some apple cider vinegar, an orange, a lemon, raddichio, salt and pepper, and as an optional choice, edible flowers. I've just washed my sprouts and my raddichio, and they're sitting here drying a bit while we make our salad dressing. We'll start with our apple cider vinegar, honey, and salt in this mixing bowl. To that, we're just going to add this orange zest, lemon zest, as well as the juice from the lemon. We'll season it with salt and pepper while we mix it up a little bit. Then we'll do a little dice on the shallot and throw it into the dressing. When everything is combined, we're just going to slowly add in our oil while whisking to emulsify the dressing. Liquids and fats tend to not want to mix together, so by whisking while adding the oil, you're basically forcing it to come together as a single unit instead of 2 units dancing around each other, like the red wine sauce from last week. With our dressing nicely combined, we're going to start processing our Brussels sprouts, and to do this, all we need to do is cut the bottoms off and split it in half. Then we'll just run our knife through so that we have a nice shredded Brussels sprout. We'll add this to our dressing as we go along. When it's all in there, make sure to give it a quick stir so that all the Brussels sprouts get coated and can start wilting thanks to the dressing. While the Brussels sprouts are marinating, we're just going to cut the raddichio in the same fashion as our Brussels sprouts. If the head is too big, you don't have to use it all. It has a bitter taste that can be a little bit off-putting if there's too much, but with the right amount, it creates a perfect balance between the relatively sweet dressing. With the chives, I'm just going to run my knife through and chop it kind of fine and add it to my radicchio. Lastly, we're just going to supreme this orange by cutting the tops and bottoms off, and then we're going to take our knife and remove the skin and the white pith. Then while holding it, I'm just going to cut out the segments between the skin, making sure to only get the naked orange segment and then cutting it in half. Before serving, you'll want to add the radicchio, chives, and orange segments, and then toss it together. The very last step is to add the edible flowers if you are deciding to use it. I had a really hard time finding any fresh flowers around me, so instead I used the blue cornflower petals for my Thanksgiving video. And this is our Wood Elf Forest Salad, all dressed up and ready to mingle. Moving on, we're going to start doing our Greenspear Bundles next, and the ingredients are super simple. We have olive oil, bacon, asparagus, chives, and salt and pepper. That's it. The first thing we're going to do is wash our asparagus and then cut off the bottom ends of the stalks because they are extremely woody. Then we're going to move on to our chives, which are going to be cut in the same way as we did for our forest salad. We'll toss the asparagus in the olive oil and season it liberally with salt and pepper. Then we'll take a bundle of 3 or 4 asparagus and wrap bacon around it kind of on the diagonal until you're out of asparagus. When we've wrapped all the asparagus spears, we'll toss it in the oven at 425 degrees for about 15 minutes or until everything is cooked through. I ended up cooking these for almost 50 minutes since the bacon wasn't cooked through, and in the end it seemed a little pale and not as golden brown as I'd like. I think the next time I do this, I would par bake the bacon, which just means to cook it halfway through, let it cool, then wrap it around the asparagus before baking it. This way the bacon should be crispy and cooked all the way through while the asparagus doesn't overcook. The problem could also be my oven though, so make sure you have an oven thermometer to tell you if you need to calibrate your oven or not. And here are the Greenspear Bundles. I'm just going to garnish it with the chives we chopped up earlier. The last thing we'll be making today is our Drow mushroom steaks, and it's also a relatively simple recipe with a few ingredients. We have some olive oil, fresh thyme, portobello mushrooms, lemon juice, salt, and pepper, and some balsamic vinegar. To start, we'll make our marinade in the shallow pan here by starting with the olive oil, then we'll add some lemon juice, balsamic vinegar, salt and pepper, and then finally the thyme leaves. For the thyme leaves, we're just gonna wash it, dry it, and then run our fingers along the stem, starting from the top and going down. They should remove the leaves while keeping the stem out of the marinade. After the marinade is done and everything's mixed together, I'm gonna set it aside and start prepping the mushrooms by removing the stems and wiping the top with a damp paper towel. After the mushrooms have been destemmed and cleaned, we're just going to let it sit in the marinade for about 15 minutes, flipping them halfway through and spooning the marinade in the gills. I actually ended up marinating for a little longer, which I think imparts more flavor since I was doing the other dishes in between this. After it's been marinating for the amount of time you'd like, we'll just put it on a grill pan and cook it for about 10 to 12 minutes on a medium-high heat. My mushrooms ended up taking about double that time, but it could be because my mushrooms are a little bit bigger than normal. When they're finished cooking, they should be soft but still have a meaty bite to them, and they can be served either room temperature or piping hot. And here are the completed Drow mushroom sticks. They're looking pretty moist. Everything is finally finished, and we have a nice completed Elven meal with our Elven Bread, our Greenspear Bundles, Wood Elf Forest Salad, and our Drow mushroom steaks. Let's go see what our guests think of our meal. Alright, so today we have Dungeons and Dragons. We have a completely Elven menu.
Where do you have the food today? Yep.
Salad first. All right, what is the salad? That's good.
With me,
It's
that's
citrusy.
okay. It's good.
It's good.
I love the salad. A little bit sweet, not sweet much. Bitter, a
Very
little
healthy.
bit. It's good. Yeah.
Good stuff. Yum. So, could we pick this up by our hands or
You
how?
can do whatever you want.
I'm gonna eat with my
Oh,
hands.
bread
'cause
smells
it's
good.
Dungeons and Dragons, and they eat with their hands. Bacon. Yeah. So this, if the bacon was crispier, that would be great. But it's still good. My favorite is asparagus and bacon.
Sparkle is very moisture.
It's good. Bacon. It's good. Could be a little more crispy, but still pretty good.
I smell the bread. I want to try the bread first. It's good.
That's good. Elven Bread.
Elven.
Elven elves. You know what elves are?
Oh,
Christmas elves.
Elven bread. Okay. Yeah.
Wow, sweet. I'm a sucker for cinnamon bread. Smells like, it reminds me of raisin bread.
Soft and a little bit sweet
Yeah.
and
It reminds me a little bit of a cinnamon roll, but like light. The butter makes it even better.
it's like a cinnamon sandwich at like
Yeah.
mini made cinnamon roll, raisin bread.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, nice.
Oh,
Good mix.
that's the mushroom. That I
Very tasteful. Oh, it has a strong taste to it. Mushrooms, but
a little bit Not soft, but a little bit like a punchy.
Like
something.
garlicky?
A little
I don't know
bit,
what's
yeah.
in here. Some kind of flavor. I don't know what it is.
It tastes like a little bit sour and sweet.
It's good. Oh man,
Something like that.
this is a very healthy alternative. This would have been good, great with turkey.
Có lấy cái salt, cái pepper ở đây.
Do you need salt and pepper?
Yeah.
I think it's good without it. Fancy.
Put it a little bit salt in there.
I like the taste of that vinaigrette and the mushroom. It reminds me of I could eat pasta with this. So out of this three, the bread and this asparagus is probably my favorite. I could definitely eat this with bacon. Like breakfast. Well, cheers, Mom, to some waters.
Yeah.
It is. Cheers.
I hope everyone had a nice, relaxing New Year's, and if you made a resolution to live a healthier year, these Elven recipes are a good start. Dungeons & Dragons is a vast universe with endless possibilities. It's not really hard to see how creative these can get. I hope you might consider grabbing this book, but if you're still not convinced, I'll come up with another menu another day. Until then, I wish you the best in 2021, and I'll have another video ready for you next week.